I was a decently nationally ranked powerlifter, but over the next year and a half of exploring these techniques, I became one of the best. There were people like, oh my God, he deadlifted 1,000 pounds and he did it without shoes. Can you imagine like what he would do without that handicap? And I'm like, it's the other way around. That was the performance enhancement. So I was competing in powerlifting and I started getting this set of injuries. It just sent me on this deep dive in this concept around the foot, the whole connectedness of it. And it really brought me back to where I was growing up. And I did run around a lot with no shoes. The proprioceptive abilities and the structural that I had built during my early life played really well later in my life once I was able to regain some of that. At that point, I kicked the shoes off and I just started going shoeless with all of my training and started doing foot strengthening exercises. And it was incredible what it started doing for me. It is so strange the disconnect with which people view the foot as opposed to the rest of the body.
For a lot of people, it's not the first place they look because I swear people forget they have feet. They just out of sight, out of mind. They look down, they have shoes. They don't have feet. Why are we treating feet fundamentally different than we would treat any other body part?
Everyone's feet matter. Everyone's bodies matter.
Before we jump into this week's episode, I wanted to steal a minute of your time to talk about something that literally changed the way I live: natural footwear. You see, most of us spend our entire lives wearing shoes just to fit in with the crowd. Before I joined TFC, I was no different. I worked as a journalist and I was spending 12 hours a day for almost a decade in these stiff, rigid dress shoes. And then before that, throughout my childhood, I was in stiff-heeled school shoes. I was in cushioned sneakers and those narrow soccer boots as well. But when I slipped on my first pair of Vivo barefoots, I felt something completely different. Freedom. My toes could finally spread, my soles could feel, and my feet could actually move the way they were meant to. It was honestly liberating. Vivo Barefoot has been such a huge part of all of our journeys here at the Foot Collective. They're not just making shoes, they're making tools that respect human health and the planet. And they've been walking alongside us for years, helping people take the first step toward better foot health. So if you're ready to start reconnecting with your foundation, check out Vivo Barefoot. You'll find the link in the show notes, and if you use the code TheFootCollective, you'll get a special discount off their shoes. What do you reckon the most common question is that we get asked by our customers? It's, where do I start on my foot health journey? And to be honest, the answer is different for everybody, and that is why we have created the Foot Health Assessment. So in less than 10 minutes now, you'll be able to answer some simple questions, go through a few foot and balance screens, and then get a score that shows you where you're at right now out of 100. Based on that, we can now give you tailored guidance on the best place to begin. Here's the kicker. Research shows that 1 in 3 adults over 65 will fall in the next 12 months. And balance problems and dizziness are really common now in adults over 40. That means this isn't just about preventing falls in older age or trying to get out of foot pain. It's about training your foundation now so that you can live a longer, happier, and healthier life. So if you're curious, you can take this free foot health assessment now. Just head to the link in the show notes.
All right. Hello, TFC community. Welcome to the Restore to Explore podcast. My name is Nick, and I have the honor of hosting today's conversation with Chris Duffin. Chris, thanks for being here and welcome.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm just remiss. I was trying to find my flat Shoe Society shirt this morning, and I couldn't. So, without I wasn't able to rock that this morning. So.
Well, all I can see is "Trust me, I'm N." So I'll just assume the bottom says a foot fanatic.
No, it's the "Trust me, I'm an engineer" shirt that's on this morning. So, which is related to the drawings and patents and stuff behind me. Probably can't quite see it, but
I guess there's a reason they call you the mad scientist, right?
Yes, that's correct.
With that said, Leo da Vinci had a quote that said the human foot is a masterpiece of engineering and a work of art. So as an engineer, you look at the human body as a whole, it's incredible. But I think the foot in particular, to me, is particularly fascinating and frankly, a little bit amazing and mind-boggling, right? When you look at the robotics we have today, the super high-tech humanoid robots, and you look at their feet, they're basically like these dumb flaps compared to what we're packing. So, cool. We'll get into all that.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know Chris, he's a man of many talents. To name a few, you're an author, you're an elite powerlifter. I believe you're the lightest body weight ever to deadlift over 1,000 pounds. I don't know if that still stands, but that's an incredible feat. You're an entrepreneur, a business leader, a machinist, and you founded a natural footwear brand called Barefoot Athletics. So you have a big resume, huge repertoire. We're going to keep it tighter and keep it to mostly feet today.
All right.
But for people who want to know Chris's full story, I will refer you to his memoir, a book called The Eagle and the Dragon, which I listened to the audiobook probably years ago now. But it was a very powerful story, and I'm not going to even attempt to do any justice to it. I want people to just go and read the book or get the audiobook. Just out of curiosity, briefly, what inspired you to share your story through the book, and why did you choose that title?
So the inspiration behind this sharing the story, which was a hard piece to come to, and it was really valuable to kind of work through that entire process just for me personally. But I had shared bits and pieces of my story and things around my philosophies through the years. And every time I had done so, it was really empowering for a number of people that listened to the message. And I just had some very consistent feedback. And then, one day I was sitting there, I was in my hot tub with my two oldest kids, and I was looking at them at the same age that and thinking about this when I was the same age as them. And that's when it really hit me just how distinctly different and unusual my upbringing had been. And that was the point of going, all right, I need to package this together and spend some time putting these thoughts in this story. And it became a process of, all right, how do I make this not a story of woe is me, or, oh, I'm so great, I've done so much, or any of these other things. I'm really just using that story as a medium to share the lessons, to be able to share those things that I learned, that you don't necessarily have to go through those experiences to learn that. How do I share that with my kids? In no manner do I want them to live the life that I lived, but I want to impart those lessons. And so that was, I never knew if it was going to pull that off until, it actually got done and out in the market and people read it, whether I pulled off the objective. But that was the impetus for it. So, and some of this really relates back to the story of the foot as well. Because, well, my brand, it's named Barefoot, like as in a bear. And it really is, my partners actually approached me because I've been doing education around foot mechanics for a number of years. And they had this idea. And they're like, hey, we want to do this brand inspired off of your background running around the wilderness, barefoot in the wilderness with
bears potentially.
Actually tracked by them before, and had them tear up my camp, which was my home, because that's some of the short story is growing up homeless in the wilderness around Northern California, Eastern Oregon, and dealing with a lot of things. So it is a little unusual. We don't need to go into that. But I did have a big connection to nature. And I did run around a lot with no shoes in the wilderness. Like, that is like my upbringing. And later in life, I became, this engineer. Then I became a corporate executive, and I'm wearing what I call my fancy pants and my dress shoes. And I was a competitive, I've always been a very physical person as well. And so I was competing in powerlifting, and I started getting this set of injuries, and it just kind of sent me on this deep dive. And the deep dive was in this clinical perspective around developmental kinesiology and a lot of movement patterns. And over the course of that, the concept around the foot, and then its impact on position and the diaphragm, and just the whole connectedness of it. And it really brought me back to where I was growing up. right? And, I was spending all day long walking around on concrete and factory floors wearing my fancy dress shoes and living that life. And I was starting to get a culmination of injuries, starting to explore these concepts. And at that point, I kicked the shoes off. I kicked the shoes off, not in the work environment, but in my training environment. I owned a gym, and I just started going shoeless with all of my training and started doing foot strengthening exercises. And it was incredible what it started doing for me. And admittedly, I was doing some things, with the rest of the body as far as diaphragm to pelvis relationship and stabilization but it's all tied together, right? The toe to tongue connection, like we're talking breathe and bracing, we're still talking these fascial lines that are connected all the way through that foot, and how you're managing the arch of the foot and how you're creating power, and then the impact of that through that whole chain. And I was a pretty good power lifter. But like I said, I had some injuries.
Quite humble and modest, but yeah.
Well, I wasn't
good.
the power lifter that you know yet. So I was a decently nationally ranked power lifter. But over the next year and a half of exploring these techniques, I became one of the best. I traveled, the globe competing in different competitions. I ended up being ranked number one in the world for 8 years straight, either the squat, the deadlift, or the total, and then ended up doing some phenomenal. But all of that came as an output of exploring these pathways. And when I started doing this, like this is 2010, 2012, particularly no one in the strength realm was doing it. Like, yeah, this was right after the Vibram craze and some of the backlash, around that was going on. But no one in the strength environment, and I was getting called out. People were making fun of me. But I had a roster of athletes at the gym that I worked with, and they started seeing great results. And there's a lot of people that trusted me online, and people that started following that. And next thing you know, it became this pretty big shift within strength training, which then kind of strength sports. And then that shift started rolling out into a lot of other strength sports. So I believe that I ended up having a fairly significant impact on these concepts in that type of environment, where I think it would have been another decade behind the movement. And I was certainly well ahead and kind of ridiculed early on in the process until those things started happening. But yeah, that ties back into that origin story, is like, this is me in life rediscovering those things that had worked well for me. And I think honestly, the strength and maybe proprioceptive abilities and the structural that I had built during my early life played really well later in my life, once I was able to regain some of that. Because I've got big flippers.
You got big meaty flippers.
I have big meaty. I have jacked feet. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, interesting. And it is pretty common. Some of the stories that I've heard from, whether they're elite athletes of any discipline, it could be strength, it could be endurance, it could be running, whatever it is. You often hear these stories of a childhood that actually really nurtures a strong foundation for the lower body, whether that's running barefoot, lifting barefoot, spending just lots of time barefoot, right? You have this richness within your feet that allows you to sense the ground, and a strength and resilience in the feet that kind of removes a governor that I think for a lot of people is just there because they got weak ass feet. And you don't deadlift 1,000 pounds without having a really strong conduit to the ground, right? Like, that is your connection point when you lift the weight up. So I think at the elite level, it's non-negotiable, but for a lot of people, it's not the first place they look, because I swear people forget they have feet. They just, out of sight, out of mind, they look down, they have shoes. They don't have feet.
It is so strange, the disconnect with which people view the foot as opposed to the rest of the body.
Yeah.
Like, when I started, and still I'll get this kickback of like, where's the science to support it? Here's the science behind. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, You're an exercise scientist. What are you talking about? Please explain to me how the foot is different than any of the rest of the body. You have to use it. You have to challenge it. You have to have some level of stress, and then you have some adaptation. Like, this is basic human physiology. Like, where is the science that somehow the foot is different? And it's really great now that the studies, because I used to have that argument in theory, 10, 15 years ago. And now, there's so many things that we can pull back to, like, the studies around plantar fasciitis, where we're looking at, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's like 96, 98% of imaging of plantar fasciitis cases, which, terminology means overuse of that plantar fascia. And both MRI, ultrasound, and even biopsies are confirming that it's all underuse. It's related to atrophy of the muscles, lack of blood flow, creating tendinopathy issues. Like, it's the complete opposite of what people think. Now, that doesn't mean you don't necessarily need to have a passive period and a break. Just like, I hurt my elbow. Well, maybe there's a few days or something like that where I put a wrap on there to help me, but like doing that ongoing forever. I know I'm preaching to the choir here.
No, but I think it's important. Keep going.
But yeah, if every day I wake up and I wrap up my elbow, what's going to happen? What is going to happen? I'm going to end up having injuries in that arm because it's going to get weak. I'm going to end up with injuries elsewhere in my body because of the compensatory patterns that kick in the overuse of those other areas because of those imbalances. I mean, it's just a flat, simple truth. It doesn't mean that there's not a place to put an elbow sleeve or an elbow wrap on given a period of time. And that's pretty on point with the context of research around, let's say, your arch supports, right? Nothing, I think you guys did some of the meta-analysis around that, looking at that. Like, yeah, it, provides some temporary relief in the 6 to 8 week period of time, but no long-term benefit. Well, of course not. We're actually removing the ability to have adaptation because we're no longer challenging, or even we're teaching ourselves to be reliant on this passive structure. So we're actually doing the opposite. Just like if I put that wrap on my arm and I just start relying, I know that that's going to be there. Like, it starts changing those neurological patterns. It starts changing your position. Like, all of a sudden, it's like, again, I talk about that disconnect. That disconnect even goes to like a proprioceptive, like, awareness, where you see people just kind of like resting on their foot. You know what I mean? Like, just like the arch is flattening and they're just like standing on this stump instead of like, grabbing that ground, like being able to be active and control their body and its interaction with the ground. I mean, you mentioned deadlifting 1,000 pounds. Yeah, I did deadlift 1,000 pounds for reps and squatted 1,000 pounds for reps. And both of those I did completely barefoot, no shoes. And when I did those, though, actually the first one was literally like a week before we met in 2016, I believe, because I played that video when I showed up at Swiss, because I'd just done it like the week before. And at the time, and still even years afterwards, there were people like, oh my God, he deadlifted 1,000 pounds and he did it without shoes. Oh my God, can you imagine like what he would do without that handicap? And I'm like, no. It's the other way around. That was the performance enhancement.
There you go. Who knew that taking a piece of clothing off could be a performance enhancer? And it really is. I mean, the disconnect is stark, right? It's like you mentioned basic physiology. One principle I love to come back to and find agreement on with people who disagree about feet is like the SAID principle, specific adaptation to imposed demand. Fundamental principle of physiology, not going to be argued by very many, at least not any serious people that really I care to listen to or talk to. And if you find agreement on that, and then you say, well, okay, why are we treating feet fundamentally different than we would treat any other body part? Like if your neck is sore, do you just put a neck brace on and accept that that's your fate for the rest of your life? Never take the neck brace off? Most people would be like, no, that's silly. You got to move your neck. You got to strengthen your neck. It's like, why are we treating different areas of the body completely different as if they have different laws of physiology? It just makes no sense. But again, I think where the that frustration can also be an opportunity, right? We have this cultural blind spot in the world of movement, even at the elite levels of professional athletes, where we kind of forgot about feet. And I think it's because the stuff upstream kind of distracts us, right? The areas where you have the symptoms distracts us away from the fact that we're not even paying attention to the very foundation, right? It'd be like spending all your time building the house and not really giving a shit about the foundation or looking at a glaring crack there. It's like, that would be silly. That wouldn't really be very logical. Yeah, and I love how you worded that, right? It's like having no shoes is the performance edge. It's actually a benefit. Whereas most people see it as like, oh my goodness, what are his feet going to do without a piece of clothing to support them? It's like, bro, he's deadlifting 1,000 pounds. What are shoes going to do? It's so goofy.
And let's add some context to that, though, because I think that this maybe is where some of that disconnect comes in, right? Where if we're pushing the demands of the tissue beyond its adaptation point, right? We've got those forces. So we're thinking about the SAID principle, but we're also thinking about, accumulation of fatigue, the acuteness of the fatigue, those sorts of things. There is a time and place still for supporting that. Guess what? Like, sprinting shoes, are going to be able to add something during that period. But if you improve your foot strength and health and then put it inside of that during that incredibly high demand period of whatever sport application that is, but there's still a place in sport when you're still talking about this philosophy to have and use tools that are specific to the nature of that. It's not saying, hey, you're going to go out there and compete against Usain Bolt and be barefoot, right? We're pushing those limits, those athletes, and but at the same time, they should be spending a lot of time developing that foot and that strength of the foot. And, maybe that there still is some opportunities within those, the footwear within some of those industries around being able to make some improvements. I know in football, for instance, strength training has a big place in football. And so I have a lot of football professional coaches that follow my work, as well as a lot of well-known football players, and a lot of discussion around like, hey, here's what I've learned. This is through the years. I'm not taping up my ankles. I'm doing all this. My injury levels are way less than everybody else around me, or I've had this impact on the team because they're moving away from that, but they're still wearing, that gear on their training day. And at the same time, trying to find, unfortunately, because there's not like, hey, it's still restricting. I've got the lack of blood flow, with the cramped toes, the things that are going on in that environment where there's not really an alternative. And definitely those people that have been down that path see the opportunity and want to see some change with that.
Agreed. And I think sometimes the black and whiteness of it actually takes away from the potency of the message, right? It's not about always being barefoot or always wearing shoes. It's about, there's a place to train your feet, and there's probably some improvements we can make with the footwear we're wearing to foster a healthier, stronger foot. And exploring that nuance, and load modification is part of that, right? Like orthotics, supports, like this is just the modification of the load going through your foot. And at every point in time, everyone is going to need their own individual load modification, potentially based on their current state, capacity, injury state, whatever it might be. But I think the common thread is that whatever load management we're using with external supports should be a temporary tool that allows us to move beyond it eventually. It is not the final solution that we get stuck with for the rest of our lives. And I think that's where there's still a bit of friction. People still get stuck there and, they go into the medical black hole, they get sent to podiatrists, and they get put in orthotics for life. And then there's this creeping reliance that happens where the longer you spend in them, the more work you have to do to get out of them, and the more reliant you become on them. And it's kind of this vicious cycle, just like the opposite direction would be training, right? Like the more you strength train, the stronger you get. The stronger you get, the more you can strength train, the more you have capacity. And so it's helping people do the math in their brains that I might need to use this thing temporarily based on where I'm at, but I want to get to a point where I'm literally free of any external supports in order to do the things I want to do. And part of that is just education around footwear to make sure they're not wearing shoes that's literally setting them back. And, on the topic of shoes, it's not easy to make shoes. I've worked, 10 years in feet. I've talked to a lot of footwear manufacturers, a lot of footwear brands. It's not I even run a footwear store here in Canada called Soul Freedom. It's not an easy feat. So I guess it helps to have good business partners who want to do it with you. I'd love to know in how you envisioned barefoot going when you first maybe had the conceptual idea in your head to how it's actually gone. What are the discrepancies between how you envisioned it and how it ended up being? And maybe give us some insight from, an entrepreneur building a footwear brand. Tell us a bit about it, because it's a hard venture to go down. You're making cool shoes. I feel like when I look at those shoes, I can't help but imagine your beefy ass meat foot inside of it. And maybe it's like selfishly, maybe you just wanted shoes for his own feet, but you're also not the only one with those feet. So tell us a bit about what it's like to create a footwear brand.
Yeah. So that really was the impetus behind this. So like I said, I had some partners approach me, and they had, the conceptual idea around the branding side of this, the aesthetic side of this. And they're like, we want to create a powerlifting sock. And I'm like, no. We can do that, but we're going to do shoes. Like, that is the thing that I keep getting hit up about. Like, where do I go? What do I wear? And again, this is going back, 2016. There's a lot of footwear brands available now in this market, but there was significantly less then. And the concept really is thinking of footwear as a tool. We want the right tool for the job, right? So you want to be able to support and meet the needs, but the minimal needs that are required for that, right? There's a time and place for shoes. There's a time and place for boots. There's a time and place for my elbow wrap, right? What is the right tool? And so it doesn't mean, hey, we're going to produce a boot. So the boot is going to be the stiffest, most ankle supportive, most be impervious to everything. Like, hey, if I'm, at war in the jungle, there's a certain tool there. All right. Versus doing a light hike, I'm going to need a different tool because I still want to use, yes, I need more protection, maybe, than a really thin sole because I've got some really sharp rocks. I'm walking over, some obsidian type material, whatever it is. Like, there is opportunity for puncture, and I need to improve the ability to do that. But I want to do it to the least amount and least restrictive so I can still use the foot as much as possible given that situation. So that is conceptually how we think about the Barefoot brand. But the driver around that, I wanted something to wear myself. When we look at the minimalist shoe market, I see everybody going after solving the problem for the same set of people for the most part. So there's numerous companies in that market, but it is, I live in Portland, Oregon, right? We're solving this problem for people in Portland, Oregon and Boulder, Colorado, but we're not solving it for a number of other people that have a completely different, aesthetic. A different need for, brand image, all those sorts of things. So our brand is distinctly different than a lot of the other brands out there. And so that is, we don't use synthetic materials. I mean, maybe shoelaces, stuff like that, but it is, and that's not for everybody. Somebody that wants a vegan shoe, like, well, we've got suede and, we've got canvas. Like, we're all natural materials, and we've got more of a kind of a rougher blue collar vibe, we'll say, right? So it is, I'd say, how's that going? Well, we've got a core market that is really bought in, just tremendous repeat customer base, but it is still it's a challenge so we talk about manufacturing. Let's talk about manufacturing. Let's talk about marketing. So you've been through this game. Like, starting up a shoe brand is very challenging from the minimum order quantities, trying to get space in your factories or be able to produce yourself. Like, it is very challenging when you're working against, these titans that Like we switched, we started in, you know, in China. We moved to Mexico. We were very early in doing that, which was really great because we're actually using, when we're talking about our suede, it's coming right out of USA, and then getting, done in these, basically a family owned factory down in Mexico. But when COVID hit and things got difficult, all of a sudden these big shoe brands started moving as well. Right. So they started moving in there, and all of a sudden it's like, we can't get product done because we're a nobody, right? It's like your guys' volumes are this, your 400 shoes are their 40,000, like, or 400,000. Like it doesn't matter what you say, beg or plead. And so that's a challenge, and it's a challenge to get, the costing in an effective manner, to be competitive with those people able to do some of those moves. And we've always tried to, I said, it's been great having, a family owned factory in Mexico, and our materials coming out of the USA. But it does make some of those challenges, and that's just, the things to work through when you're dealing with being a manufacturer's hard. You have to have a lot of upfront money. You've got to build into it. And so we have gone into it in a pretty risk averse, or, being cognizant of managing risk. So we haven't taken on significant amount of debt. So it's a matter of like, we have to spool things at that rate where it's like, okay, now the next order we can go a little bit bigger. Now the next order we can go a little bit bigger. So I'm really, really happy with our product line, our ability to expand into boots as well, because that is, again, there's a massive segment of population that is just not being served by the existing brands in the market. And if we're talking about that, we should be able to serve everyone. Everyone's feet matter. Everyone's bodies matter. And so that's where we're coming in and filling that. And I think the boot is a really great place for us as well, because that is very tied to that audience and trying to create. So we also do now a North American made boot, and we have actually just taken over building those. Last week we made our first pair in-house. So
congrats.
Bought all the equipment.
That's probably a long time coming. So
it has been a long time coming.
Good on.
So we've bought, we partnered with a legacy family bootmaker to help us with this project. So helping us source, like, here's all the right equipment. They manufactured the boots for us for the first year. And then now they've helped us source the equipment and doing all the training and building that up. So the first pair of boots came out of our headquarters in Fargo last week, and we're going to continue to ramp that. And so that's really exciting, because to me, that ties home to this core market that I think that we serve. So looking at the designs of our product, I am incredibly proud. Like, seeing it now and thinking back, early on, thinking that we could create what we have now almost blows me away. Like, we've got just an amazing top tier product. I mean, admittedly, from a design standpoint, I've partnered with George Esquivel, who's one of the, arguably the leading men's fashion shoe designer around. Like, he's incredible. So yeah, we've got a really great aesthetic, and yeah, it looks similar to the $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 one-off boots that he does for Tommy Hilfiger or LeBron or whoever. Like, yeah, it does look kind of like that. But every single one is the same on our line versus, his one-off boots that he's doing for those folks. So it's, yeah, I think that gives us a really unique edge. What doesn't align is, just where we're at from a size. Like, it has been a challenge growing from a marketing perspective and really figuring out how to target that, because we are different than all the other minimalist brands. Our target market is different, like trying to, look and do things in a similar manner. We were very much the first players in the strength training realm and the gym realm. And we did dominate that sector very early on. But some of the other larger brands in the space have started copying, our messaging and going into that market very aggressively. And they've been able to gobble up, like some of the really great influential people with, endorsements and backing that we just can't offer at the size that we offer. So it's definitely a challenge in this market dealing with the size and leverage that some of the bigger brands play. And I know we say, oh yeah, in the minimalist, but there's 10-figure brands now in the minimalist market. Like it's like some of those players are pretty big. One of those, yeah, they've got the money backing of like a very legacy, shoemaker. Their family is very well off in that market. They've been in, dress shoes and so on for, over 100 years. And there's a lot of money that, at disposal and marketing that it's been a challenge. Like we're in there dominating it. And then it's like, we've got these great people that we're working with. They're doing amazing for us. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're just pulled away. And there's nothing we can do about it. So,
well, thank you.
Have you experienced anything similar to that?
Well, the footwear store that I've got in Canada is a retailer, so we don't have the same competition pressures or market penetration struggles as you would as a brand. I think your design language is very unique. So, what you said about having sort of this hardcore base of people who are repeat customers doesn't surprise me. What hit me most about your boot when I first got it, this was years ago, one of your first models, was the manufacturing quality. Because I hadn't seen, my brother's an electrician, and every year he spends $400 or $500 on a pair of boots, and they're garbage. And they have an elevated heel, they're super stiff. And even with, a $500 budget Canadian, he can't get a really good quality boot, like a well-made boot that let alone one that respects his feet. So when I first got your boot, I was like, this is an OG, well-manufactured, full-grain leather boot.
Yeah.
I haven't seen stuff like this in a long time. It seems like, most of my work now is in financial literacy, and it seemed like when the money disconnected from reality in 1971, everything just kind of went to shit. Like everything started getting cheaper. You see less quality, whether it doesn't matter if it's a car, an appliance, or shoes. It's like everything started to kind of go downhill. People would cheap out, and obviously there's more competition, so everyone tries to get their edge by doing things cheaper. But I think there's going to be a resurgence. I think your perseverance will pay off, because being able to stick it out and stay alive and keep making boots and keep iterating and improving and creating, building on the story, like even just making boots in the United States, that's a key part of the story. That's a huge differentiator, right? Most people aren't doing that.
We are the very first, minimalist, boot made in the USA. Like that's like we did that.
That's a serious title.
That's pretty cool.
That's huge. That's pretty cool. So all your struggles, what I'm saying is, I think we're leaning back to a resurgence to quality. There was an old saying where like poor people couldn't afford to buy crappy clothes. And I think people are starting to realize actually the cost of buying shitty things is, number one, there's a cost to my health if I buy unnatural shoes that are damaging my feet. But there's also a financial cost to having to replace a shoe every 2-3 years. And so buying a leather boot that you can care for and is repairable, because there's not a bunch of gunk and synthetics and stuff that just you can't really repair, is actually a good investment. And I think word goes around, especially in the trades or in, whether it's like welders or farmers, whatever, these blue collar jobs that literally the equipment you use is a huge determinant of you being able to work effectively. Word goes around there, and you get one trade that uses your boot and says like, this is the best boot I've ever bought. It's 3 years old. I'm still using it. My feet feel way better. My back feels better. It's kind of like it kind of mushrooms, right? Because then he tells another electrician, and then they have a union meeting, and he tells 40 electricians. And then before you know it, it's like people just have the gravitational pull to quality. And all it takes is perseverance and word of mouth, where the people who are actually making the best stuff end up winning in the end. But in the short term, It's kind of like David and Goliath. And as long as David can survive, the stone is basically creating a great product where it doesn't matter how big Goliath is or how big their margins are or how good their manufacturing stack is. If you make a shit product, the market's eventually going to recognize it. If you make a great product, the market's going to eventually recognize it. Hopefully sooner than later. But I think you've done that. And I think it's nice to see a company doing things outside of the homogeneous design language that is mostly done now. Everything seems to start to look the same. The shoes start to look the same. The materials start to look the same. It's all trend, fashion based, but no one's really putting a flag in the sand and saying, we're doing it like this because this is what we want. We are the users of the product. We want to make shit that's for us. And we want to do it in this way because this way aligns with our values. And we're not just going to be swayed and pulled off course because fashion trends say we should, or because we'll make slightly higher margins by doing it this way and compromising on our values. So I think there's something really to be said about that. And I think that's how you create champion customers that are like, yeah, I'm not going to buy another boot because this is the best. And this has the highest alignment with where I want to spend my money on companies that are run by people doing it for the right reasons and doing great things. So thank you for doing it because I know it's probably not easy, but I think you're doing a great job.
Thanks for highlighting the quality too. That is one thing, like, you cannot find a better product for the price that we have. Like, find me a handmade, boot, let alone minimalist, right? That for $400, like, or our ones that come out of our factory, in Mexico, they're $250. We don't have. That's one of the advantages that we do have. So it's margins are hard in that shoe market, but also, in this market where you're dealing with a premium product like a full leather boot, you're still dealing, if you go anywhere else, you've got all these extra margins. Its standard margin is around 60%, even higher if you go to a lot of shoe stores, 60, 70%. And so we're direct to customer and you're getting this amazing product. And we went, I think it was a couple of years ago, Roseanneville, which does destructive testing, big YouTube channel. They reached out to a number of minimalist companies for boots, and we might have been the only one that actually volunteered, because it's like, oh my God. And it was, our boot had just come out. So these are, and if you're launching something new, sometimes there's like, where we actually at, but it was our first production run, for one of our first few production runs. We sent them one of the boots right off the line, and we're like, we'll see how this works out, because it's a big channel. I think that, I don't know where they're at now, but they had like 700,000 subscribers or something crazy for a destructive boot testing, YouTube channel. And yeah, we did really, really well. Like, they took it apart, and yeah, there was just same thing. There was like some commentary on like, hey, this stitching we don't normally agree with, because this is the type of stitching we like to see in boots, but we fully understand, like, this makes the right sense, how you're stitching this product to be able to get the effect and still have the longevity, but still have this balance of what you need in the movement side. And like, oh, thank God they actually understand what we're designing here, because they're like, this makes sense. Is it going to be the same thing in a different environment? No. Now, one of our long-term objectives is to be able, so this is one of the hard things, is you're talking about like trades. Well, a lot of the requirements in trades is to have a steel toe boot. Again, right tool for the right job. There's obviously yet more compromises with that, but the level of investment to bring a steel toe to market is really challenging, plus the volumes and things of that nature. Now, hopefully, as we bring our manufacturing in-house, this will allow us, because that's one of the great things that it's going to allow us to do, is be able to manage both the cash flow, inventory, and all of that really well. And that's going to be a big advantage. And that could potentially be an advantage in hopefully starting to get something in that market where we've got a steel toed. Because my background is in industry. So I've got 2 engineering degrees, and I ran aerospace and automotive manufacturing facilities for about 20 years. And I'm certified in OSHA industrial job safety analysis. I've done hundreds of them, and it just destroys me knowing that environment and just watching people's feet get destroyed. And there's just no option. And you're required to wear these boots that they destroy people's feet. Like they're just absolutely horrible.
And posture in general. Like everything. Your instep can't move. Your heel's jacked up. You're literally asking for plantar fasciosis. Not to mention how much
back
it screws
problems.
It's crazy.
And so for me, I just like, it's massive potential to help people. But again, we're a small company, being able to just go, oh yeah, we're going to go do that. It's not really, it's a journey for us. It's a journey, but we've been at it now. Like you said, we're resilient. When we talk about, this is what we're talking about: strength, resiliency, building capacity. And we're trying to do that as a brand through the years. So we've been, 7-8 years now. So it's been
still going. Just don't die.
Don't
die, because if you make a great product, if you don't die, it'll be recognized. And I think bringing manufacturing domestically makes you so much more nimble. Number one, it gives you defense against variables that you can't control, right? Like a tariff. Here's a great example, right? This is the word of the year. It's a huge competitive advantage. It's a huge amount of work to bring manufacturing back onshore, right? It's way more expensive, like all these different things you got to battle. But when you actually look forward into an uncertain future, it's actually the most safe thing to do if you can afford to do it, if you can put the energy in to do it. And so I think that'll pay off for you. I'm sure it's been tough. Have you ever thought of doing something like a modular design where, your existing boot? I used to work with the hockey teams. I did a fellowship after physio school with a junior hockey team. And some skate companies would work on trying to make their skates more resilient to getting hit with pucks. And the fundamental trade-off there is you have to change the weight of the skate, which is not popular. You have to change the materials, you change the flex profile, like all these things. And what one company did is they literally started making these add-on things where you would literally put the skate guard on. It was a dense piece of Kevlar composite, and it would go along the front of the skate, and it would literally just Velcro. It'd strap right on. And so players could use their existing skates, but you basically just tacked on this exoskeleton on the exterior of the skate. It worked perfectly to dissipate load when it got hit with puck. And I've always thought that the best way to do, this is from my naive, not manufacturing brain, but just conceptually, it's like, what if you made a boot that was modular in design where you could literally pick your protection level? Like you have the boot, base boot, then you have boot plus, which is like mid protection, and then you have boot plus plus, which is like crazy elephant grade rhino protection, right? Where you can literally just, whether it's, I don't know how it would happen, but you literally just clip something on and then it becomes a different level of protection. And I think, to me, because you make such a good boot that can be used every day, like the reality is most people are going to walk around in their steel toes, right? Because they're big, they're bulky, they don't need it. But if people could wear your boot and then could just tack on a protective exoskeleton for when they need to do that work, that would be cool. And I realize there's a naiveness about, all the certifications and the stamps and all that nonsense. And there's probably way more bureaucracy than there needs to be. But I'm sure that your engineering mind has actually been a huge benefit with making footwear, because frankly, the way footwear has always been made is not necessarily the way that it should be made from first principles. And if you view footwear as just a tool to protect the valuable foot, then you can actually come at it from first principles and end up with a very different design profile or manufacturing technique than has been used for hundreds of years. Because that's not the best way of doing it necessarily. That's just how it's done. That's how factories are built right now. And it takes sort of someone who is willing to go out and stick their neck out to do things differently to disrupt that. And maybe for people to realize, actually, shoes can be made cheaper and better and actually respect the feet if they're made in a radically novel way. And I think when you bring manufacturing onshore and you have like a little think tank, and you're allowed to do innovation at a velocity that you can't do, and you have to communicate over country lines with people who are literally steeped and trained for their whole lives in that way of making shoes. I talked to another footwear manufacturer, and he was like, "Yeah, I want to do shoes differently, but every time I go to a factory, they basically say it can't be done, or we don't do it that way." And eventually, he's like, "Well, I had to build my own factory because there was literally no way of getting any legacy footwear maker to change their mind and do things differently than they've done for 100 years. And frankly, from that person's perspective, why would they? They've done it this way. They're getting business. They're probably still going to get business if that guy didn't give them business. So yeah, I hope you keep pushing. I look forward to trying your American-made boot because that sounds badass.
You're on the right track there. So, in that market, there is clip-on steel toes, right? And from the ability to be able to transition or use the existing base that we've got and be able to create that right tool. So that is one of the issues when I talk about controlling inventory and cost, because anytime you add a new SKU in shoes, it's massive because you have to now roll that across all the different sizes. So being able to get closer to a one-piece flow concept where, hey, a customer wants this is what we're actually making, and that's what's going out the door, versus we need 10,000 of these in stock because we have to have all the different sizes to be able to support whatever orders come in. That is the problem, right? And that is based on one of the issues is there's so many feet in the world, right? So if you're going to be a massive brand, that's what you need to be. And so making the decision of who you are and what you're going to be can help you with that and getting that. And so this move that we're doing has the potential. And yes, that's part of the thought process around this, right? But we have added, so we talk about doing things differently. We have something that is not a shoe and not a boot and is in between those two. The Ursa Day, it is my favorite. It's absolutely phenomenal. So it is, it's somewhere between our traditional shoe, our Ursus, and the boot. And it's got, a thicker leather sole, it's got thicker leather, really great feel and look. Like it's something that you could dress up in. I mean, it is just hot looking. And the sole is not quite as thick as the boot. So we've got a lot more flexibility. And from a design standpoint, I want to roll back to our original Ursus, which we still sell. From a performance standpoint, is absolutely phenomenal. So we think about a couple things. One, we do have the lowest durometer sole. So it's incredibly, you have that connection. You want to stick to that ground. You want to be able to transfer power. It's incredible. But with that, we don't have the wrap of the sole that everyone has. And, when people are looking at flexibility of the shoes, they'll often roll them up, going, look, they're flexible or not. But one of the things that people don't do is twist the shoe. And you go, why would you twist it? Well, the arches of the foot, they operate at different frequencies. And so while there's not technically a rotational plane of the foot moves like it has a rotational plane when you're active movement, because they're operating at that different frequency. And our ability to be able to transfer power and drive that large toe or that pad between the large toe and the second toe to the ground, and be able to get that firing pattern that you want to be able to transfer power out of that hip, like that is part of that process. And so if you want the optimal, you want to be really free in this. I should have grabbed some shoes with me today. I'm sitting here barefoot, but be able to grab it and watch and twist and feel that. And anytime you've got some of that wrap on the sole there, it's going to inhibit that movement of the foot. And it's about freeing that as much as possible. And so that makes that platform still the absolute best when it comes to performance and connection to the ground. There is no shoe out there that is superior to our Ursus shoe when it comes to performance and connection and power transfer. That is just plain and simple truth.
What do you wear?
I usually wear the Ursus, and I do wear the boots a lot. I do a lot of shop work, but I'm usually wearing the Ursa Day because I'm doing a lot of fabrication. I'm climbing up on my roll cages and in and out and around things. And so people would think that I, would be wearing the boot all the time. But that freedom, you think about like rock climbing, right? You need to be able to, you're grabbing on your toes, you're climbing, you're moving. Like rolling under things. Like I want to have flexible, and then just honestly, our suede is absolutely. I love the feel of our canvas, but I'm welding, and even our Ursus is great, and I'm welding because it's stopping those those weld berries that are dropping on me from going into my foot. So
yeah, you don't want those getting through the canvas. And then are you wearing the Ozo as your fancy pants shoe?
Yes. Yep.
Very nice. It's like that's another market where people have to wear, black leather shoes. And the options, until fairly recently have been super limited, where it's like basically if you have to wear that shoe, you're going to mess your foot up because you don't really have optionality. Whereas now you're seeing more brands, and I think it's still a big opportunity as well, to just make formal shoes for people who do work in offices that don't mess your feet up and still look good. And I think that's, I'd love to hear your opinion. In the past couple of years, I started doing this in 2015. In the past couple of years, it seems like the awareness of footwear and foot health is accelerating. It's kind of like hitting a stride. I don't know. In just what I've seen, are you feeling that? Or are you seeing that?
I am. Very much so. There has been some kickback on it as of late in some of the strength training realm, but across general population and hearing people talk about it and just like going to events like my, kids sporting events, and I'm just looking around and I just see guys, I see, Vivo and I see Zero like all over the place on people's feet. And so again, I do live in Portland, so I think there's a lot more maybe awareness around some of those concepts just from the the running vibe and stuff like that in this area. But it's hitting this phase of gen pop, and that's why we're seeing some of these brands that were 15-20 million a year small brands, now all of a sudden massive companies like private equity ownership like there is of Zero now. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
TBD.
But TBD, exactly. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it seems like the inflection from niche to necessary is like coming, right? Where it's not, I don't think it's going to be a linear path. I think there's going to be an inflection point, kind of like with athleisure. A company came out with pants that didn't feel like shit to move around in, that maybe people used to wear for the gym but couldn't go to the cafe or the office. And then all of a sudden, like in the blink of an eye, people are like, whoa, I'm just going to wear these all the time now. Lululemon blows up, turns into a publicly traded company, and the aesthetic taste of people forever changes. And I think there's going to be a similar moment in footwear to that athleisure moment.
I think so too. I see it on the way, because once you start wearing it, like, hey, I got these shoes for the gym, I got these shoes for whatever, that people just end up switching. Like it's just the nature of it.
But 75% of people in North America will eventually develop foot problems. So when you switch shoes and you realize, wow, switching shoes solved most of my problems, and then you hear people complaining about foot problems, it's hard not to mention the fact that, like, hey, I used to have foot problems too. I switched to shoes that don't damage my feet. My feet feel way better. Maybe I should give it a go. Look at these 50 different brands that are available now. A lot of them look really good, which isn't something that you could say necessarily 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's coming, and it feels good. It feels like kind of vindication for people who've been talking about feet and been pointed out as the weirdos. It's like, actually, it is important. Actually, your shoes do matter. Great.
But it's got to get to the point where it's a driver of the fashion, because it's not going to make that shift until that becomes a component of it. Like that's just the reality of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which is why I think we've done great with like the look of our boot, and the Oso and these others is hitting these really classical designs that can pair well, whether you're dressing up, down, so on. And that's an area I think we have really nailed. We just haven't gotten awareness to that larger market yet.
I just saw your Patriot boot on the website. I was sneaking it, and
doesn't that look good?
That's a good looking boot,
dude. It is. That's the one we're making, and they are just they're hot. Like I said, it's I keep two of them. one to keep nice for when I go out.
It's like the Timberland 2.0, right? People used to wear Timberlands all the time, and they kind of went out of fad. But I think, whether it's companies like Detroit Red Wing or whatever, people are still paying $500-$600 for a super well-made, unique heirloom boot that literally will last you your whole life. You're not gonna have to buy another pair. You just have to take care of it. And I think people are swinging back. At least what I'm seeing is people are starting to swing back to that. I spend a lot of time in.
I hope the waste that is in the world today with fast fashion and everything else, I just absolutely I like quality, and I like to build things. That's why I build a lot of that's why I build things. Like I want it done right, and I want it to last forever. I want, whether it's a vehicle I own, I plan on owning it for 20, 30 years. Like I'm going to keep buying stuff and throwing it away and buying more stuff. Like I know I sound like such a hippie here, but like it just
the hippies got some things right. Okay, they really did.
Yes, my wife laughs at me because I've always she's like, but that's just the way I am. And I've converted her now through the years. She's like, oh my God, you're right. Like, it's just, I've wasted so much money, like trying to buy this cheap thing. And then I have to buy another one and another one. And, if there's something that I really use, you invest in it. And it lasts.
It is very expensive in the end.
Yeah.
And high quality stuff is an upfront investment, but it's actually cheaper in the long run if you take care of it.
Yep.
We got 3 minutes left. I got one question for you before we wrap up. You're in a room with 120-year-old aspiring entrepreneurs who are thinking of making footwear. You got 2 minutes with the mic. What do you tell them to inspire them?
Oh my gosh, I need more than 2 minutes to prepare
this
for
that. This
that.
is the constraint, Chris. I don't make the rule. Well, I did make the rule here, but
okay. I am going to tell them, don't do it. You're not going to be successful. All right.
That was like,
and I'm not going to give them the explanation of why I tell them that. But if they can't fucking overcome me telling them they're not going to succeed, they're not going to succeed.
But that's genius. The ones who listen to you weren't meant to do it.
It's true. It's true.
And you thought
if you come to me asking me if I should go into business for myself and you need my validation and pump up, it ain't for you. Because it's going to be hard, dude. You're going to have to put a lot of, that's just, it's the truth.
That's a great answer. That's a good place to wrap up. Where can people find out more about you? Again, your book, The Eagle and the Dragon, I believe.
Yes.
Is available. If you want to really, I highly recommend it. And by the way, just to come back to the point that you made at the start, as someone who listened to your book, was heavily inspired by it, there was no sense of woe is me. And it was all, well, I commend you on the courage of telling the true raw story, because it's a pretty intense story. And I think for me, what it helped me do is recalibrate whatever hard times I have in my life, because everyone's going to have hard times and everyone has their own context. It really, on a relative basis, whatever hard things that I'm going through, on a scale of insanely hard to not hard at all, you change my perception, where everything that I'm facing is now not as intense, not as hard, not as insurmountable, knowing what, forged you in your life. So I think it was a beautiful example of the hero's journey in an inspiring way to kick people in the ass and say, you can have whatever circumstances in your life, but you can also move beyond those circumstances and achieve excellence in whatever you want to, as long as you persevere. And I think you did a really good job with that. And I'm very grateful you wrote it. And I encourage everyone who's curious to hear a really cool story, which I hope one day gets turned into a movie, because it would be really cool, to check out that book. And then Barefoot, BEAR foot, just Google barefoot shoes. You'll see them pop up online. Anywhere else you want to send people to look at what you're doing? And I guess one question out of personal curiosity, what are you into these days? What are you focused on right now? Because you do a million things. What right now is your focus? What are you stoked about?
Yeah. So I exited from my manufacturing company that made exercise equipment, the best biomechanically sound around last year. And today, yes.
Cool.
So today I am focused on Barefoot, but also some unique things on the cellular medicine standpoint. So I've been involved in application and use of peptides for over 20 years and helped build a lot of the protocols that people are floating around in the recovery space about 10, 15 years ago. And so I've recently released a couple unique small molecule peptides and have some additional ones on the way. And so I do a lot of coaching around restoring and managing and optimizing health, as well as executive coaching. So helping entrepreneurs, high performers, both with their life challenges. So life mentoring, business mentoring, as well as like amplifying themselves, their physiology, their cognition, all those sorts of things through the use of cutting edge compounds. So it's really interesting. So just like 30 seconds on it. But, a lot of the things that I did to perform the major feats of strength and stuff like that are detrimental to one's health. Not to get into details, but you don't squat and deadlift 1,000 pounds without the use of anabolics. Like if anybody thinks otherwise, let's pull the hood off of that. But what we can now do with improving what the functioning of the cell and sending signals to the cell, which is what peptides do, they're messengers. We can actually enhance performance while at the same time improving your blood markers, your health outcomes, your reduction in risk for chronic diseases. And this is just absolutely phenomenal. That space is moving really, really incredibly fast over the last couple of years. So that's where I'm at right now. So you can learn more about what I'm doing. Just mad scientist Duffin on most any social media platform. I'll be there mostly on Instagram, chrisduffin.com. There should be a link to coaching if you want to learn about that other stuff, which is at enhancedexecutive.com, which might make sense based on what I just said. So,
Chris, thank you for your time. Thanks everyone for listening. And thank you, Chris, for being a pioneer in this space, because you were talking about feet and optimizing feet before it was cool. And I think you're a big part of why it's gotten cool. I'm grateful that you make shoes and you're part of that team. Check out Barefoot Shoes. If you're curious, check out those beautiful looking boots. Thanks to everyone for listening. We'll catch you in the next Restore to Explore podcast. Ciao.
Thanks for listening to the Restore to Explore podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to hear more or watch more, then the best thing you can do is give us a like, a follow, or a subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And of course, leave a review. That support means that we can continue creating more educational content like this for our community. If you would like to learn more about our tools, our training, natural footwear, just explore the shop or some of our free resources, then the best place that you can go to is thefootcollective.com. And like we mentioned throughout this episode, we do have a special discount for our listeners in the show notes. Thanks for listening.